When Anglo-Saxon England was facing the Viking invasions among old men, there was a queen of great importance who fought against them. This queen was Ethelfled, the daughter of Alfred the Great, who was the king of Wessex. In her youth, she was married to the lord of the Mercians, Ethelred. After that, Wessex and Mercia fought together against the Vikings. When her husband died, Ethelfled became the new ruler of Mercia. As such, Ethelfred demonstrated her brilliant capacities as a leader, politician, and warrior. Her greatest feat was the construction of fortifications all around the Mercian border. Thanks to her collaboration, the Danelaw was conquered by her brother, Edward the Elder of Wessex. To sum up, Ethelfled was not the common noblewoman in the Old English period. She was a warrior queen and a brilliant politician.
Would you believe me if I told you that there was a noble woman in the Middle Ages who rode a horse completely naked through the streets of an English city? Well, according to an ancient legend, such a thing may have actually happened. The woman I am talking about is Lady Godiva, who ruled over Coventry with her husband Leofric, Earl of Mercia, in the 11th century. You may ask yourself, why would she ride a horse naked? Well, the reason is that Godiva's husband promised her that if she dared to do it, he would abolish a high tax that was impoverishing the people of Coventry. Since Godiva's generosity was admirable, she accepted the challenge, even if that meant exposing herself. Finally, after she rode through the city wearing nothing but her long blonde hair to cover her body, Leofric decided to abolish the tax. So whether or not the myth is real, Lady Godiva and her legendary feats are worthy of recognition.
When one thinks about the Middle Ages, one always thinks about wars and kings. But how about queens? Do you know any medieval queen? Here I am to introduce you to Catherine of Lancaster. She was Isabella of Castile's grandmother. She came from England, although she was of Castilian descent. She was the first monarch to be addressed as the Princess of Asturias, a thing we still have in our days. She was the queen regent for 12 years after her husband died. A woman in charge of a kingdom was not a usual thing in this period. Catherine imposed herself to nobility when they tried to take her son from her. She also signed alliances with kingdoms like Portugal or Aragon. She also was responsible of signing truces between England and Castile, two kingdoms that were always at odds with each other. She was the first monarch in Europe to sign a truce with the Arab territories in the south of the peninsula, obtaining 100 of Christian prisoners as a reward. Now you know a little more about a woman who did great things in the Anglo-Spanish history.
Have you ever heard the name Marjorie Kemp? Probably not, but have you ever heard the word autobiography? I bet you have. Well then, I think you must know about this very special woman. Marjorie Kemp was the first person to write an autobiography in English, almost 600 years ago. Marjorie had a life full of mystical and religious events which were portrayed in a book called The Book of Marjorie Kemp. You are probably thinking about how amazing it is that a woman brought to life a literary genre in English. You will be even more thrilled to know that Kempe was a middle-class woman that opened her path through a male-controlled world and who even went on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. I am sure that now you will want to do your research and know more about her.
Margaret Roper was the daughter of Thomas More, a famous humanist during the English Renaissance, considered the father of the utopian novel. Not only her lifetime decisions are worthy of remembrance, but also what her existence represents by herself. Margaret was the example of how the stereotypes against women, already rooted in the English culture, broke little by little. While women were considered intellectually inferior, Margaret showed inborn abilities for several disciplines like Greek, Latin, astronomy, philosophy, physics, logic, rhetoric, music, and arithmetic. And because of this presupposed women's intellectual incapacity, their authority and sole presence was ignored, but Margaret was appointed as the spokesperson for her father while he was imprisoned, breaking again some more stereotypes while doing so.
We all have seen female pirates in movies and TV shows, but did you know that female pirates were a thing? That's right. Some of the most revered and feared pirates were women, and one of them is the woman I'm going to talk about here, Mary Wolverstone, aka Lady Killigrew. Mary was born around 1525 in Suffolk, and she married the pirate, Sir John Killigrew. But she wasn't just a wife, she also was involved in the raids and attacked some ships of her own, killing everyone on board. She loved being a pirate even more than her husband, and she was pretty good at it too. However, she hasn't transcended history and has almost been forgotten. That's why it's important to recover her and all the forgotten women in history.
When we study English literature and its important authors, we never forget the name of Philip Sidney, but fail to mention his sister, Mary Sidney Herbert. And you may think, why do I want to know about her? Well, Mary Herbert was one of the first English women to achieve a major reputation for her poetry and literary patronage. She introduced her own religious and political ideas into her works, showing that she was far from being subordinated to male authority. Did you know that Shakespeare himself was influenced by her translation of Robert Garnier's Antonius? Or that she was the one that carried out the metric version of her brother's project, the translation of the Psalms? I believe now you start to understand her importance, but if you still have doubts, she was the first English woman to be graphically represented with a laurel wreath reserved for male poets.
Elizabeth Alkin had a crucial role in two of the most important events of the 17th century in England. Firstly, she can be presented as one of the most important women in the English Civil War, as her role as a spy was crucial for discovering some important information for the parliamentarian forces. Also, at that time, her work as a publisher was important for parliamentarian forces, because it was a great propagandistic tool. Secondly, in the First Anglo-Dutch War, her role as a nurse was even more important, as she saved many lives without taking care about their side and risking her economical welfare. So she is important because she is an example of a woman with an active role in a field which is typically associated to men, the one of the war, but also as an intelligence agent and as a publisher. Well, I think that as a society we must recognize and admire all these women who fight for their beliefs, justice, and save other lives in a field traditionally associated to men.
In the 17th century, there was a woman named Margaret Cavendish who loved science and philosophy. However, at the time, those subjects were reserved to men. She was pioneer with some theories that inspired through the years and contributed to explain the world as we know it today, with theories such as the functioning of atoms. Thanks to her work, she became the first woman to be invited to attend a Royal Society meeting, a learned society with intellectuals, scientists, and researchers, but she never became a member because of her sex. She was the most published author of the 17th century and was also known as the first feminist scientist and promoted equal education and access to knowledge for both men and women. Her eccentric personality also played a big part in her reputation. Indeed, people were wondering whether to take her seriously or not. Therefore, her personal life and who she was affected the impact of her work and her credibility.
There is an enormous absence of women writers in the English tradition before the 19th century. But did you know who was Aphra Behn? Aphra Behn was the first English professional woman writer, and she lived in the 17th century. In a literary world dominated by men, she got to earn her living by writing. She explored controversial themes for her period, like self-determination and the tyranny of patriarchy. However, it was not that easy for Behn. The difficulties she found as a woman writer are reflected in her works. I will be kinder to my brothers of pen than they have been to a defenseless woman, she said. But her endurance and her model have made her an example for later generations of women writers, as, for instance, Virginia Woolf.